Welcome back. It's Tim and Julie Harrison. This is your favorite daily real estate coaching and training podcast. And I can say that with certainty because this is the only daily real estate coaching and training podcast. And our topic today is, has your buyer drip campaign run dry? And this is going to be 6 smarter ways to hunt down the right home for your buyers. Now, I'm going to start out by explaining to all of you guys the impetus, the motivation for this show was you. You have been messaging us, letting us know what's going on in your businesses, where you're struggling, where you need some coaching and training. And it's always important to understand that this podcast is an overview. We're never actually going to be able to, solve the issues at the level that we'd like to, because we only have you for a half hour a day on this podcast. So when you're listening, make sure you're listening and you're taking notes and you're thinking, how can I apply what Tim and Julie are trying to help me with? But do understand, and we'll often tip our hats in sort of as much as we can, given the time allocated we have, to let you know that there's a lot deeper you can go on that particular topic. And I'm going to start out by saying this. The points that Julie and I wrote are fantastic. We would say that, right? But none of it matters unless you're doing a thorough pre-qualification job. None of it matters unless you're actually working with the right buyers out of the gates. And by right buyers, I mean the buyers that have the highest likelihood of wanting to transact. So I'm going to start out with, before Julie gets to point number 1. By the way, Julie, welcome to today's podcast.
Thank you. It's going to be fun. This is something they need.
They do. So here's the thing that you've got to understand, and to be very clear about this in your mind. Now, today's show is about buyers, which is great. If you have a choice, which you do, to where do you put your primary focus every single day, where you put your best energies every single day. And if you're like, pretty much everybody on planet Earth, depending on your age, frankly, you maybe have 3 or 4 hours you can work really with a high level of intensity and really accomplish a lot in a little window. And generally speaking, for most people, that's in the morning. So if you have a choice, which you do, of where to put your efforts, you should definitely be putting your best efforts towards being a listing agent. That said, I know that we're focusing on buyers today. Now, why would I say that though? Because here's something really important that you remember. There's no such thing as a buyer that has to buy. There are lots of reasons why a seller has to sell. So in other words, just think about this very practically. If you're, and this is not telling you how to pre-qualify or coaching or training you how to pre-qualify, but I'm just giving you the real focus on what the difference is between a buyer and a seller. Flipping to sellers. If you ask a seller, through a series of questions that we have for you in our pre-qualification scripts, the essence of it is, do you absolutely have to sell this house? The motivated sellers, the sellers that actually transact, are always going to say yes. And you look for reasons. You look for, maybe there's a financial issue. Maybe there's a relocation. They can't own 2 homes at once. They inherited the property. All kinds of reasons. They're really fantastic, obviously motivated sellers out there that you should be focusing on your best efforts every day on chasing, for sure. Now, you ask a buyer the same question. Do you absolutely positively have to buy a house? The answer is no. The answer will always be no, because it always has been no and always will be no. Now, some of you are going to say, well, what about a 1031 tax exchange? And that is probably the only thing that's close to somebody who would have to buy, only because they want to save the money on the taxes, but they could still just pay the taxes and not do a 1031 exchange. So why do buyers, what happens with buyers? Well, they change their minds. They decide to stay put. They rent for another year. They remodel the kitchen. They add a bedroom. All the things. They decide to change their mind about buying a home because they don't like the interest rates. They don't like the term of the mortgage, or, the political winds, or, that's what happens. Whereas if you've got a seller that has to sell their home, they don't care what the interest rates are. They don't care who the president is.
They don't even have to qualify to sell in the same way that a buyer does have to qualify to sell.
That really cuts through it. To buy. Yeah. That really cuts through it right there. So if you have to choose what you do, where you're going to put your best efforts every single day, make sure you're tuning your frequency, your brain, to chasing sellers, because that's always where you're going to get the most leverage. And, so as we go through these points, I want you to really clearly understand that you will find great buyers in your career. You will find great buyers every single day. The greatest buyers you're going to find are your sellers that have to buy something because you already know what their motivation is. The greatest buyers are going to be those sorts of those folks that are well qualified because they're taking the equity from another property. So a lot of you get frustrated, especially the newer agents, because you're relegated with working with first-time buyers who would love to buy, and you'd love to help them find a house. But, interest rates change, mortgage terms change, the nature of their eligibility for a mortgage, all the things. And so they just decide to stay put. They don't move. And then you've wasted months and months and months trying to find them a home. And here's just to put I think a psychological line under what the point I'm trying to make. Any of you listening, and there's thousands of you that will listen and watch this podcast, how many of you would choose to have 10 buyers over 10 listings, right? And all you're motivated, all the sellers are, price, condition, location, motivation is all in alignment. Perfect. These are all going to sell. Any one of you watching or listening right now, would you rather have 10 buyers than you would sellers? You wouldn't, because if you had 10 sellers, you're going to be able to have a normal life. You're going to have to be able to work a 9 to 5, schedule. You're going to be able to, because the listing activity as a professional listing agent, as that being your focus, it happens during normal business hours. You're not going to, so when you're working with buyers, you're working vampire hours. You're working the hours that they're not working. And that means you give up your nights and you give up your weekends. With working with sellers, it's normal to have a normal working life, a normal working schedule, and you also have much more consistent cash flow. Again, you're going to throw off some great buyers when you focus on sellers. But as we get to these points, I want you to never forget what Julie and I were just explaining to you, because it really can make the biggest difference in your career if you just focus all your best energies every day on being a listing agent. And when you have a bunch of buyers in your life that are filling up your CRM, what it does is it creates a false sense of security, because you think those buyers are going to materialize into future paychecks. And again, all kinds of things change and they might not. If they don't, how vulnerable are you financially? Probably very. How many of you would rather have 10 listings right now versus 10 buyers? Always remind yourself of that. And you don't need to delay become a listing agent. And one of the quickest paths to becoming a listing agent is Premier Coaching. And we created all that for you so you can immediately learn how to proactively lead generate, immediately learn how to do high-level pre-qualification. We give you a pre-listing pack for both buyers and sellers. We give you a listing presentation. We give you a buyer presentation. We explain the entire process from A to Z, how to lead generate all the way to close the transaction, how to scale your business. It's all included in Premier Coaching. And if you've not yet joined Premier Coaching, what the heck are you waiting for? Spring has sprung, obviously. Now we're moving into summer. Can you believe that? So go to premiercoaching.com or just click the link below to join Premier Coaching, premiercoaching.com. It doesn't cost you anything for the first 30 days to be in Premier Coaching. And that does include a free daily semi-private coaching call with one of our Harris certified coaches. So please do not delay and go to premiercoaching.com or click the link below. All right, Julie, let's get to these points.
Yes, and I 100% agree with you. You want to concentrate on being a listing agent. But that said, for the sake of our 6 smarter ways to hunt down the right home, these 6 points will alternate a little bit between what you said, first-time buyers that are really motivated and actually qualified, who are ready to rumble as much as a buyer can be, as well as what I've seen from coaching clients where they have a great listing. And sometimes what happens is they get an offer that the seller probably should accept, but the seller doesn't, because they don't believe that they can find something to move to, because you haven't shown them anything that they can believe that it's worth making the move. And then they end up rejecting an offer that was actually a really good offer. So there's many flavors of finding the right home and taking that responsibility on. Remember, the title of this is, Has Your Buyer Drip Run Dry? It's not the buyer's job to respond to this automatic drip system and find their own home. It's your job to know really specifically what they're looking for and to find it. And that's our first point. Re-examine your buyer's wants and needs using the pre-qualification script questions that we give you in Premier Coaching. So what does that mean? What's a deal killer? What's a deal maker? And most importantly, why is that important to them? If your buyers are stuck, for example, on a specific neighborhood, why is that? Is that because it's got a clubhouse, walking trails, proximity to work or school? Well, there's probably 10 other neighborhoods that do meet that criteria. If they say they want a view, does that just mean they want a private backyard, or do they really have to have a specific view?
Well, but Julie, specifically, these are pre-qualifying questions. And I know
Yes.
it's very difficult for us not to get into the weeds of this, but Julie's, for example, she'll say, like someone might say to you, we want a private backyard, which is what the point Julie was trying to make as an example. And you say, and this is in the script, you say, well, that's great. A lot of folks are, or no, here's a better example. I want 5 acres. Or we used to hear this a lot. I want 5 acres. And they never have had 5 acres before. And then you say, well, that's interesting. I hear that quite often. Why is it that you want 5 acres? Well, I don't want to have my neighbors. I want to have privacy from my neighbors. And in their mind, they think 5 acres is privacy from their neighbors, which it really would be. So then you ask them, well, I don't know if you've considered this, but if I were to find you a house with a really private backyard that maybe backed up to trees or a forest or something like that, where you didn't even know your neighbors were there, would you still want 5 acres? No, that's really what I'm looking for is privacy. All right. So you went from showing them houses that are an hour away from your marketplace,
And
which
hard
you
to find
and
and
exactly.
scarce, right?
Right, exactly. And which you know they'll never buy, to now realizing that they just wanted a house where they could, have some privacy in their backyard. You guys get the point? You got to remember, okay, here's another one. I'm looking for a house with I'm looking for a great deal. Mr. Buyer, I appreciate that. I hear that a lot. A lot of folks are looking for a house that's a great deal. What does a great deal mean to you? And you learn to ask these questions, because then what you'll discover is what you, dear listener, thought a great deal meant was maybe, well, it's a great deal for the price. But for the buyer, the great deal may have meant, well, I'm going to be able to move out of my old house into my new one. And my kids are going to be able to enroll in school prior to school year starting and doesn't need a lot of work. So you've got to learn to ask questions. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to find yourself being frustrated and saying stupid things like buyers are liars, or they're not. You just didn't pre-qualify them at the highest level. Next point, Julie, and this is really important too. Point number 2, target stale listings. Now, targeting stale listings. Go ahead, Julie.
Well, what do we mean by that? And why would you want to do that? Well, you guys are working in some cases with buyers that can't or won't compete for hot listings, scarce listings. They keep losing because they can't go over the appraisal, or they can't go over the list price, or they just aren't qualified. Maybe they're FHA and they're competing against conventional or investors. So search for homes that have been on the market for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. These properties often come with less competition, or maybe no competition, more negotiable, more motivated sellers, because they're still on the market after 60 days. They probably have to sell. Maybe they've gone through a price reduction or two, and it just looks like a stale listing to everybody else, but it's perfect for your buyer. And greater flexibility on terms too, now that they know it's not going to sell overnight. So that can be the solution for buyers who keep losing out.
Well, let's go to expand on that. Even better than a stale listing, or maybe equally as good, would be an expired listing, would be a for sale by owner listing, which is a great way for you to introduce the buyer or the potential FSBO or to you as their next listing agent when you're bringing a buyer through. Maybe you're going to go look for notice defaults. You're going to look for rent by owners where the house has been for rent for a while and the seller is not doing a very good job getting the property rented. You're looking for short-term rentals that have gone sour. There's a lot of those out there where folks would happily sell their houses. We teach you guys how to do all this in Premier Coaching. The moral of the story is if all you're doing, and this is what the point Julie has with this whole, outline, which by the way, you can get these notes for free if just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com, and that's our daily newsletter. Just subscribe to the newsletter. You can get all these notes for free. Again, it's, free, so there's no reason for you not to do it. Harris Real Estate Daily. But if you go and you start thinking about all the places where there's a seller, an owner that wants to sell, there are probably maybe 15 really good sources of finding those types of listing leads. And what's really fascinating is they don't cost anything. The best listing leads don't cost any money, which is, interesting, I think, because it's the very thing that you'll never hear anyone trying to call you up and trying to sell you, right? When they're texting you, constantly offering you leads, you ever notice they're all sort of mediocre, crappy buyer leads? No one's ever calling you up and saying, hey, Julie, did you know that there's 5 new expireds in your MLS code? Oh, hold on. We can't sell that to you because the expired leads don't cost anything. Now, I want to mention here, it's an interesting thing, because we are getting a lot of you waking up to the fact that expireds are such a huge opportunity. If you've not yet subscribed to RedX, you need to check that out. And what RedX, they're our preferred partner when it comes to sourcing all the expired listings for you. So what they do is every night, basically, after midnight, they'll look to see what the newest expireds are in your marketplace. They automatically then search for the phone numbers, not just one phone number, but sometimes, a lot of phone numbers that are associated with that owner, give you the property profile, the whole thing. And then you call that seller in the morning using our script. And that's how you start proactively lead generating to potential sellers. Now, if you're using our script and you're calling the seller with the intention of getting that listing as yours as a listing agent, well, you know what? You have a lightning in a bottle if that happens to be a good match for one of your buyers. This, you guys, the essence of the difference between what Julie and I are hoping you guys understand is critical that you do in this market, any market, but this one in particular, is you have to be proactive. The idea that you're going to do a bunch of social media marketing, the idea that you're going to be doing a bunch of anything that's passive, where you're waiting around for people to call you, it barely worked in the past, and now it really truly doesn't work now. And I was watching an Instagram video the other day, Julie, and don't let me forget. By the way, guys, if you want the RedX information at a discount, just text the word the word red RED to 47372. Text the word red RED to 47372, and we'll text you back a link where you can join RedX for $150 off. And I'm going to give you guys a little pro tip. Make sure when you subscribe, you ask them for the older expired leads. So go ahead and text the word red, RED to 47372, and we'll text you back a link and you can join RedX for $150 off. That, if you were to ask Julie and I what we will do if we were ever wanting to get back into selling real estate, A, we'd sell real estate in a really expensive area. B, we definitely work expireds and centers of influence and past clients. Those are the three elements that you all should be considering for yourselves as well. So text the word RED to 47372. So I'm on Instagram the other day, and I'm, probably posting a picture about you or Zoe or something. And I came across somebody who is a wannabe real estate coach trainer type. And all he's doing in front of this group of agents is telling them how important it is for them to be influencers. In other words, he was going on and on and on, almost belittling them for not thinking that they should be the next Kim Kardashian. He used her as an example, and how like the brand that you should be doing from social media. And he said, like, look at so-and-so, they built such a big brand on social media. He actually used Logan Paul, who was one of our neighbors. He was able to actually start Prime Energy drink, and now it's worth all this money because he had this big brand. And I'm thinking, as I'm watching this, if I were in the audience, I would have asked this. I wouldn't have been able to help myself from asking, what's the, excuse me, Mr. Know-It-All, what's the point of doing all of this? Well, so you can be known and everyone will know your brand. Oh, okay. So what's the point of doing all this? Well, so you can sell Prime Energy drink? No, it's what he was hoping you would believe is that by essentially being an influencer, that was going to cause people to want to do business with you. But every study that's ever been done, especially with real estate, has shown that is poppycock. So if you want to generate what he really would have said if he was being bold was because, and it wouldn't have been true, but it would have been bold. Because once people see you as an influencer and they have homes to sell, they're going to call you to list their homes. Now, if he'd said that, at least he would have been speaking real estate, right? But he wasn't. He was just trying to appeal to agents' egos, appeal to agents' innate desire to be recognized and feel important and influential, opposed to answering the obvious question, what the hell, why does any of this matter if my job is to be a listing agent? Why don't I instead just call an expired listing? You guys get the point of what we're trying to teach you here? A lot of the stuff that's being taught out there or trying to be taught out there is a complete and utter, thorough, embarrassing waste of time. And when confronted with a few very simple questions, okay, so I've got a big brand on social media. I've got 10 billion followers. I got this, that, and the other thing. So what? What then happens? Well, then people are going to call you. For what reason? Well, they're going to, maybe list your house to buy a house with you. Well, why don't I skip all the social media, the video making, and all the time and the anguish and the money that's going to take for me to even have anyone give a hoot who I am on social media? Instead, why don't I just call an expired seller and learn how to proactively lead generate to sellers? Well, that means you're going to be one doing the calling and they're going to be rejecting you and you're going to have to learn skills. Yes, but I learned those things once and there's no algorithm that's actually going to change what I have to say. Yes, Julie?
No, I was like, oh no, you have to make a direct connection with somebody who obviously has their hand in the air, who is a one-for-one contact that needs your help. Oh no, what could go wrong, right? I mean, there's so many barriers between what you describe on Instagram, for example, and TikTok, et cetera.
Well, we were talking about this, Julie. Look at Google. I mean, you and I
Yeah.
are listening to a podcast yesterday and they're talking
yeah,
about
that's interesting.
Yeah, well, we're listening to All In, and they're talking about the fact that AI, Gemini AI now, like hardly anybody by comparison is using Google for search, which I embarrassingly have to admit I still am. But they're all essentially speculating that within months, nobody's going to be using the traditional search, going to a thing and putting in your search thing. They're going to go to AI, and AI is going to do the search for you because the AI is faster and it's more complete, because people won't want to just have a bunch of search results where then they have to click on a link and then maybe click on a link, another click, What they want is the answer. And that's what AI is able to deliver to them. And that means the pay-per-click. Think about this, listeners. How many of you invested money? We've done it in SEO. Well, search engine optimization to a website is irrelevant in the world of AI, right? Search engine optimization was designed for so that your site would appear high on Google's search algorithm. What the hell does that have to do with AI? Big nothing burger. That's what it has to do with AI. So all the things, if you had invested a lot of money and tons of money creating funnels and doing all this everything, trying to, pay per click, trying to funnel buyers in particular off to some sort of, CRM database where you're hoping and praying that those folks are going to want to raise their hand and buy a house through you. In essence, that whole business model, the whole lead generation model it's dissipating and quickly will be eviscerating right in front of you. And how many of you are prepared for that? And where is it all going to go? It's all going to lead back. Look, what happens to Zillow in the world of AI? Who's going to go to Zillow in the world of AI? Why would you? Why wouldn't you just go to Zillow and say, based on where I am right now, can you tell me homes that meet these criteria, and it's going to go to all the, and you won't have to click around in a million places in Zillow. It's going to pull up all this is probably the reason why Refkin at Compass is being apprehensive about the effectiveness of essentially online search, because he can see in the future that maybe that stuff's not going to be relevant because of AI. So why am I telling you this? The one thing will never get replaced is going to be your ability to proactively lead generate, your ability to pick up the phone, your ability to communicate with people, your ability to actually have the skills necessary to become a powerful agent. That AI will not take that away. You're not going to be replaced. Agents that don't know how, the old saying, kind of snarky, but it was true, technology will replace agents that don't use agents that use technology will replace agents that don't use technology. And now it's going to be agents that use or are overly reliant on technology are going to be replaced by AI, and the agents that are knowing how to essentially have non-technology based conversations are going to be the ones that are going to rule the day. That is what's happening. That is the big macro trend. It's going to be back to first principles of knowing what to say and how to say it. Hopefully you guys are all understanding that. And if you don't believe me, you just need to look at your own behavior and how it's changed in just the last 18 months since ChatGPT came online. And look how much your customers and your clients and your neighbors and your friends and family, how their behavior is changing. We're just getting started. So Julie, let's get to point number 3 and 4.
Yes, again, we're trying to drill down on how to be more proactive than your buyers are and not relying on your drip system to produce what they're looking for. One of my favorites, and I think yours, solutions, is to always include new construction, even if they've been kind of like, I don't know, new construction isn't for me. But how do they know that it's for them or not if you haven't at least shown one property, assuming it meets their criteria, their price range, their general geographic wants? Maybe you're going to show 4 resales, but put a 5th new construction on the end that is basically their criteria. But you know what? It's brand new. There's not going to be anything to repair. It smells good. It's staged. It's in a brand new neighborhood.
Let's get an easy button for that, okay?
Yeah.
So if there's generally speaking, you're going to have and let's say these people are in a $400,000 to $600,000 price range. There's a lot of builders that are building in that price range, and usually the neighborhoods are adjacent or near each other. So my advice to you guys on this regards is not coaching and not training, just as the sort of a way to kind of save yourself a lot of time, is befriend all the new build reps. And then generally speaking, they're going to want you to be with the buyer on the first meeting when you introduce them to the builder, right? They're going to want you to physically be there. But after you get to know the build rep, they're not going to really put that requirement or that burden on you. And you can just text them, or you can, do some email and maybe create a jot form and just email it to them where you're giving them the buyer's information. And every time you have a buyer, even if they say they're not interested in new construction, you should broadcast that buyer's information to the new build reps in your community, understanding, you better have the previous understanding if those buyers buy with any of those build reps, you're going to be on the contract. And most of the build reps will do that because they really don't want you there. They want to just do their job. They don't have to like gag and, dance around with you.
You get in the middle of the deal.
You're in the middle of the deal. You're not needed, believe it or not. Maybe not even for negotiation, honestly, because most of the builders aren't going to negotiate. So just keep that in mind. That's a quick way for you to essentially cover a lot of territory with new construction. And then, another very obvious should be way of befriending these build reps is to bring them lots of buyer leads, because that's what they want. And how many of those buyer leads are also going to have houses to sell? How many of the buyers that they're working with have houses to sell, and they might be able to refer you listing leads? Point number 4, think beyond school district boundaries. What do you mean by that, Julie?
That's right. So sometimes buyers will say, I have to have XYZ school district. Well, why is that? Well, I've heard it's the best school district. School districts compete with each other. There's always one that's within 1 percentage point of another one. And sometimes the price ranges are like $20,000 or $30,000 off for whatever reason. Maybe one's a little bit more rural than the other one, but at least look into the fact that maybe they love that because it's got a great STEM program. But this district also has a great STEM program. Would you consider the right house in that school district? Also,
let me take an opposite of that, okay?
Sure.
How many people rule houses out because they're in a what they feel to be a subpar school district?
That's right. Same
Then
idea.
If they were in the money they're probably saving on property taxes, not to mention purchase price, could be used for private schools, or they could do homeschools. So there's
That's
a lot.
right. And also a lot of the school districts that you've got to be in, you're dying to be in, but you maybe pay them. A little known fact is that you can actually pay tuition. A lot of them, you can live outside of the district and pay them $1,000 a year and they'll get you on the roster. You don't know if you don't ask. So that's something that makes a huge difference with agent knowledge that you're probably not going to get out of AI. You're probably not going to get that out of Google. So you got to call and find out. Yeah.
You have to, exactly. And it's the people at the school. Julie just said something that was gold. I hope you guys caught it. If you're to have two, like Olentangy schools and PAL schools, and we had where we sold, there were all these, and one was way better than the others. Well, what Julie and I were able to do oftentimes is if we listed a house that was in the less than ideal neighborhood or less than ideal school district, the house was almost like 20 to 30% bigger and sometimes better in finishes wise, but also almost always 20% less in cost. So it was a bigger, better house, the bigger lot, more desirable.
And lower taxes too.
And lower taxes, like all good. The school district the house was in wasn't necessarily desirable, but what we learned, because we went to the school district and asked them, and back then it was like $5 or $6 grand. If the homeowner pays $5 or $6 grand tuition, they can actually enroll their kids, even though they're not technically qualified because they're not in the same school district. Mm-hmm. Interesting idea. How many of you knew that? How many of you will be able to now list houses that were expiring because they're supposedly in less desirable school districts, because you now know how to make them in more desirable school districts? You got to call, you got to ask. Julie, let's go to the next point. Point number 5.
Yes. Point number 5, we call this matchmaking, using your own center of influence, your own database as a private MLS. So look at your past clients, look at your sphere as an off-market listing resource. Who owns a home that meets your buyer's needs? When was the last time you talked to them? Do they know the current value of their home? What if they did? Would that cause them to be your next listing as well? I have quite a few of my own one-on-one clients, and many of them are luxury agents that are doing like 40 or 50% of their transactions using this particular point, where they ask themselves, okay, you want to be on the lake? I've got, 3 past clients that live on the lake. Go ahead.
Think about it from this perspective. You guys, some of you only want to do passive communication with your centers of influence and past clients. And that's a trash idea. You've got to be picking them up and calling them. And what do I say? Well, obviously we teach you in Premier Coaching, but you know what? If you've got a buyer that's a potential match for the house that they may or may not have for sale or wanting to sell, that's still a golden reason for you to call them. And when you're calling them up and saying, guess what, your house, I have a family that's looking to move into the community. This is the price range in which they're looking. I don't know if you are considered selling the house. They're going to say no. And then you say, well, I appreciate you thinking about it. By the way, do you realize that right now your house is worth between, 1 million and 1.2 million, just, depending, and give them a brief overview of the CMA, ask them if they want a more in-depth CMA, again, bringing value. And maybe they do, maybe they don't, it doesn't matter. But before you end the call, you always say, by the way, who do you know in the neighborhood who's thinking about selling that these buyers might be a great match for? What are you doing there by making that one call? You're bringing them great news. The house is desirable. You're bringing them great news, reminding them probably how much equity they have in the house. You're bringing them great news that, frankly, they won the real estate lottery. In a world where we're constantly being surrounded by bad news, and you be the purveyor of great news that you're sitting on $500,000. Did you know that, Mr. Seller? Even if they're not interested in selling, you're going to make them feel good. And then when you end it with, by the way, who do you know who might be thinking about selling in the neighborhood? Don't you think they're going to put some serious thought to that? What do you think, Jules?
Well, absolutely. And what's beautiful about those deals, because a lot of them do actually come together. And to your list of good news, it also could be good news that you've got a buyer that only wants that neighborhood, that loves your floor plan. You don't have to show your house 30 times to find that right buyer. You don't have to go through all that process. The beautiful thing about these deals, these matchmaking deals that come together, is that you, the listing/buyer's agent, have a lot more control with your buyer and seller clients, You can create the right closing and possession time frame. You can do lease backs. You can make it all happen for them. And boy, are those loyal clients when you do that.
And the next point, Julie, point number 6 is something that I've had some private coaching clients do. I mean, obviously, this is a golden idea again, is if you have a buyer that is looking at a particular neighborhood and they're very specific, they're just not going to change their mind. They want this, right? And, you know, maybe it's the location, maybe it's on the water, maybe it's whatever. What a fantastic excuse for you to go out and door knock, right? And then again, we've had, you know, this is what will shock many of you is where this works the best are on the really expensive homes. And the reason it works the best on the really expensive homes is because almost always the sellers have another house that they can go to, no problem. And if you're knocking on their door and you're bringing them a potential of cashing out hassle-free, to Julie's point, you know, they can pick their move date, they can pick all the things, you know, and they don't have to deal with showings or any of the rest of the normal selling hassles. That might appeal to them. And if it doesn't, what are you doing? You're leaving an impression on them. And now you want to add them to your centers of influence and past client, especially if you had a conversation with them. You're going to want to offer them a CMA. You're going to then leave what impression? That you're a good proactive agent. Look nice, you know, look professional. Follow our premier coaching system when it comes to door knocking. There's a whole descriptive thing in there about that. And you're probably going to be at the top of their list when they're actually ready to sell their house. And always ask for a referral. By the way, who do you know is thinking about, who do you know who might be a good match for these buyers, or who do you know who might be needing my help to get their home sold in this market? Those types of questions that we give you guys in Premier Coaching. This is how you build a referral fee free business that is not dependent on technology, not dependent on how many followers you have on Instagram. You think that seller's going to go knock, knock, knock. I've got it. You know, you're Willy Wonka delivering the golden ticket, and you're about to tell them that, you know, you've got a buyer that's ready to, you know, buy their house and all the rest of it. You think, and this is all of it's legit and they're excited. You think you're going to stop? Hold on, Julie. Hold on. You don't have enough followers on Instagram. Sorry, not going to work with you.
No.
Oh, hold on. Let me see.
No seller ever.
Let me see what you posted on TikTok last time. No, you could be a complete ghost, but they're going to do business with you. Are you starting to connect the dots here, dear listener? Yeah. I mean, practical, tactical, and we're always going to give it to you guys BS free. Hopefully you appreciate the nature of the content that we presented for you today. If you want the notes, which all of you should have, make sure you subscribe to the newsletter, harrisrealestatedaily.com. In the meantime, thank you for keeping this number one listen to daily podcast for real estate professionals. Do like and subscribe and do all the normal things, but also do us a favor and let other agents know about the podcast. That is probably, you know, it's interesting. Referrals to our coaching program has probably our biggest source of coaching clients, new coaching clients, are absolutely centers of influence and past clients. You guys are our centers of influence, your listeners and whatnot. But we get a ton of people that come to us because they were referred to us from another podcast listener, and some of them, it's amazing what's happening, because Julie and I have been doing this for a long time, and I've never felt so much momentum around what we're doing. It's really started about 3 years ago when all the social media stuff became oversaturated and people forgot. It was like a lost, they forgot how to actually pick up the phone. They forgot how to have proactive conversations. All the things, all the first principles things that makes a great agent great, no one was teaching because everyone was gravitating towards wanting to be the newest Gary Vaynerchuk of real estate. That's still going on to this day. And so people would sometimes be seduced into going down that path. Agents would, because it was everywhere. After all, I maybe need to have a bunch of TikTok videos of me dancing around with my cat or whatever. I get it. And then what would happen, assuming they were able to financially stay in the business, is they would accept the fact, maybe after listening to our show, that, hey, guess what? That stuff doesn't work. It's all just mostly a gimmick. And then what they'd say is, I should have listened to you guys in the first place. So I'm going to give you permission not to have to suffer the pain and anguish and embarrassment of doing some of those silly things, and follow your intuition. You already know what we're saying is true. Statistically, 93%, depending on what which results you read, 93% of all consumers are choosing who they're going to work with, listing sellers in particular, based on a past client referral. In other words, they know the agent, or it's a referral from someone they know, love, and trust. And less than 10%, but arguably less than 5%, are finding their agent for marketing and advertising. Those are just facts. You've seen the numbers millions of times. We talk about it in our mastermind. So the question is why are you spending all of your hopes and dreams, energy and money and time on maybe finding one of those 5%? Because that's where everyone else is hunting. You're putting all your hopes and aspirations in the most competitive section of the lead generation, world where everyone else is as well. That is, what is the exact word? It's the exact opposite of the word smart. You guys choose what that word is in your own language, right? So do what other people aren't willing to do when they're not willing to do it. And you're going to experience levels of success that they won't simply understand. They will write off your success to you having, been on third base and, believing that you somehow had it coming to you, or believing that somehow you had an inroad, or you had some kind of, what I'm saying here. They're going to try to write it off, your success, to you cheated or you had some unfair advantage. None of those things were true. You were just willing to do what you didn't want to do, and you didn't want to do it at the highest level. And you did it consistently. You did it until you started winning. That right there is the key. Anything you'd like to wrap up with on this, Julie?
Well, the moral of the story is, I mean, at least with regards to buyers, and some of the cases, your sellers who are also buyers, is you can't let them be more motivated than you are. You've got to be super proactive, because I guarantee you, some of you listening, and this makes me sad, but I know it's true. Right now, while you are considering your list of buyers, you've talked to them, they're going to do something, and you've got them set up on a drip system waiting for them, maybe they'll come across something. They're out right now talking to a new construction, new build rep. They're out in a for sale by owner open house about to sign a contract. They're in some other competing agent's open house who's going to get them to buy that house right now. Or they themselves, and this actually happens. I've had people come to coaching calls. They're like, you're not going to believe this. My buyer was out door knocking the neighborhood they want to live in by themselves. The buyer
or mailing letters, or
postcards. Okay. You can't let your buyers be more proactive than you are. And if that's what you're going to do, you're not allowed to complain about it when they go get themselves in contract. So the homework is go through what you believe to be your list of buyers and take at least all of these 6 points and many more that we give you in Premier Coaching and apply them to every single buyer that you consider to be a buyer. Some of them you haven't put through the pre-qualification script and questions yet, so you're not even that sure exactly what they're looking for or how long they're going to take to get there, or if they even have their mortgage in line or they're all cash. So you've got to drill down in the first place, what are they looking for? And in the second place, it is your job, not theirs, to find it for them.
And don't wing it. Go join Premier Coaching. It's free for the first 30 days. Don't wing it. So just go to premiercoaching.com or click the link below in the show description. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow. Hello, thank you for having watched this video. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
That's right. And don't forget to hit that like button, leave your comments and questions below, and we will get right back with you.
Thank you for watching this video. And remember to watch the next one. You're going to love that one.